Oh yeah, that's an interesting story. I started as a different company called Left Click in 2005, and the kind of the web development stuff took over. And then in 2010, I'd say we started our own web development division, and we reincorporated as Last Call in 2014. But it was all the same people that had been doing the work.
I feel like the name has been around longer than that.
Yeah, originally it was
Left
Click Advanced until 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, so across 2013, we started rolling out the Last Call branding and name stuff, and then we incorporated in 2014. But it was all the same people from like 2009.
Right.
So we've been doing the work as a team. Just kind of changed the name a little bit. Yeah. So the Last Call team has been doing this work since 2009. I guess it's an easy way to. I mean, that's what we tell prospective clients.
Yeah. And is that when that's when you started doing things with Drupal?
No, I started Drupal and doing stuff in Drupal in 2005, 2006. Didn't really like it in 2005-06.
Well, we did.
Yeah, right. So I did a lot of Joomla sites then, but I kept track of Drupal, and then around 2008 is really when it started to click and make sense. Like I figured out CCK and views and whatever, and it was just like I can do anything with this. Right. So yeah. And then in 2009, started building more of a programmer staff, and we were able to do more custom modules and contribute back to the community.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to today because we're sort of going through that same kind of development, building up design and strategy at Ispera.
Yeah, so I hope it turns out okay. Throwing this stuff together, it's all a very fresh topic for us to do.
Yeah.
Should I try to put this on?
Oh yeah. So did you hit the start broadcast button already?
Yeah.
You did. Okay. No, that's fine. It doesn't bother us. I just wanted to make sure.
The little guy's eyes blink, so I just kind of like to. know how to. I know that. I feel the switch.
Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Jason Tomatel. I'm part of, well, probably the least helpful part of the organizing committee this year. And for that, I apologize. However, I was lucky enough to draw the short straw and get to introduce this guy right here. So hope you had a good lunch. We hope you enjoyed the morning sessions. If anybody has any questions, again, Susan and Leslie are probably the best two people you could ever find to get those questions answered. Susan's standing up in the back there. And stay tuned for more coffee, cookies, and great sessions this afternoon. Right now, I would like to introduce someone that's been a big part of the Drupal community in New England and really around the world for a very long time. He started, well, it was originally Left Click Advanced when I met him, and has evolved into Last Call Media over the last few years, and is a real mainstay in the Drupal community. Thank you.
All right. Can everybody hear me? All right. Kelly Albrecht, work at Last Call Media. I definitely want to give a big hand to the organizers of this event. I organized an event in Western Mass. I've seen a lot of you over there. Nerd Summit was pretty good. Been doing it a bunch of years, and it's not easy. And so thank you so much for putting this event on. Been coming to this event for years, and very grateful. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I want to talk about Agile design in general. But I want to talk about a few pieces kind of building up to that. Case that agility is good, that agility is human nature. It leads to improvement, all to the right thing with less waste. And therefore, Agile is better design. It will be human-centered and relevant longer by evolving. But I want to start with just talking about agility in general. So agility and Agile, capital A Agile, the idea of Agile as a thing, is in a little bit of trouble. A recent report, a survey of 300 CIOs. Are there any CIOs here? Today? Not today. Not today. Well, it would be good for you to be here if you were a CIO, but so in a survey of 300 CIOs, they found a lot of things, and these were the three that I thought were the most relevant. Over half of CIOs of the survey set regard Agile development as discredited. Some are no longer prepared to defend it, right? Where you just can't defend something any longer. Half say they now think of Agile as an IT fad. This is the problem of Agile being basically sold as snake oil, sold as the solution. It will fix all the things. Things don't get fixed. Agile's the fad. Agile's discredited, right? And I think this is because Agile can be easy to get wrong. A lot of things are easy to get wrong. It's pretty easy to dive right into using some Agile method, quote unquote Agile tool, without understanding in the first place. And that would be agility with a lowercase a. Just what is agility? I think is a little tricky to understand. I remember as a kid, the agility one meant stuff like a video game or something, and you were having to select your character. Sometimes they would give you these stats, and it always made sense to me. Man, you know, maybe if these two or three or whichever one of the characters had the most strength, probably win an arm wrestling match. The speed one also made sense. If they had a race, the one with more speed would win. But I didn't really understand what this agility bar meant. But it does seem to be the case that if you think about a superhero where maybe their is agility, there's something about the way that they will battle a bad guy or get themselves out of a tricky situation, right? So agility, awareness. This superhero has this agility. Imagine that they're in a fight, they're throwing punches, and out of nowhere, a bad person comes along with a punch out of nowhere, and they duck it. That's their agility. They're adapting to that changed situation quickly and saving the day. Awareness that enables that agility, so that superhero has some superpower that made them aware of this out of nowhere punch. Maybe they can see the future. They saw it coming. They sensed that it was coming. Maybe they have superhuman hearing, and they heard the enemy coming away and dodged that surprise punch. And in this sense, agility is adapting to change based on an awareness of a changed reality. But humans can be agile too, right? So anyone who's had to change their plans for some reason has experienced some form of agility, right? So even though it doesn't feel like the most agile thing to change your plans to go to the dentist, something came up, and that flexibility on everyone's part in that changed reality and that adjustment to what needed the right thing to do next is on some scale is in some way on the scale of agility. And that's what I thought for a little while, but I continued to think about this, and I think that more than just adapting to change, I think that we can dig a little bit deeper into it, and I think it's important to dig really far into Agile so that we can get it right, so that we don't get discredited or get determined as discredited by CIOs when they're surveyed about our agility. Agility is more than having an awareness and responding to change. And I want to dig into that a little bit by considering these two concepts: deliberation, trigger action. So to carry forward with the superhero analogies, if these two were two superheroes, which one would be more agile? Which one would have a little more agile in their superhero card stat? I was talking about this with somebody who knows more about superheroes than me. They pointed out that Professor X would be a pretty good example of deliberation, whereas the Punisher would be a better example. It would be a pretty good example of hair trigger action. So who's more agile? Or the Punisher? Neither of them are very agile, in my opinion. Sure, I think agility is more than mindless reaction. And so let's imagine agility on a scale between deliberation, which we can think of as contemplation, thinking, planning, and on the other end of this is your hair trigger action, which is your reflex, just straight reaction, like I put my hand on the stove, ouch, it burned. Either one of those on their own are agility or can be agile. And if you are too comfortable on the deliberation end, and actually where I was saying that awareness enables agility, but if you're too comfortable on the deliberation end, you might find that awareness can be crippling for you. There are too many things to think about. You may spend too much time thinking, right? You're crippled. You're not very agile. You're stuck. And on the other end of things, while the hair trigger action camp, might criticize those more toward the deliberation end of the scale, may criticize them for the risks in inaction. To me, behaving like a loose cannon is far worse here. When thinking about this scale of deliberation on one end and hair trigger action on the other end, I like to think that your agility is measured by effectiveness of your response. So how quickly can you deliberate decision and act on it? The faster you can do that, your agile points go up on your agility stats. Doing something with agility balances your awareness of things and your deliberation of things with your speed of response. And to tie this back, and I think that I want to point out, though, that that's a little bit different, and I'm going to talk about this as we go on, that's a little bit different than something being agile, right? So doing something with agility is what we've been talking about, and we're going to slowly ease into talking about something being agile, like design being agile design. That's a little bit different. For something to be agile, it needs to bring awareness to its work and allow this adaptation within it. So we can work on being agile human beings working within methodology. With everything that I've been talking about, let's test this out on something that is a familiar agile topic, right? So about how can something be agile, meaning that it brings awareness to its work and it allows adaptation. We can look at Scrum. Anybody doing Scrum? Thinking about Scrum? Got some hands all the way up. We got some half-raised hands. Not 100% sure if you're doing Scrum. Some people do Scrum their way, and it's fine. You know, that's really like a lot of this stuff that I think to me is just understanding agility and what makes something agile. It's just a tool to help you do that within that methodology. So let's think about, how is Scrum agile? How does it bring awareness to its work? And how does it allow adaptation? So Scrum has some things within it. It has ceremonies, it has values, it has iterations. I'll touch on each one of those just to kind of test it against what we're talking about with how is this thing agile. So these ceremonies, this is kind of an easy one, right? You've got these daily meetings, these daily things that you do. And just meeting, just getting the status, just talking about where someone might be stuck, like in a daily stand-up, what we've been working on, what we're going to be working on, where we're stuck. That's bringing in awareness, a daily awareness. And then whatever that is, whatever that status is, whatever that update is, the right thing is to do on that day, or the right thing to do, right changes to make in the sprint to accomplish the sprint goal. So that's very important. That's where you're taking an awareness. You're having a moment built into your process to get a sense of what reality is and to adapt to that changed reality. Each one of those is an example of that. I'm not gonna dig all the way into each one. That would be a Scrum talk. I will touch on the Scrum values. As an Agile coach, when I come to a situation where people are struggling with Scrum, almost all of the time it comes down to a violation of one of these values. And it's really ending of these values and appreciation of these values that would prevent that. So the Scrum values provide a framework and a language for achieving greater interpersonal awareness and acceptance into our team work. They all play together really nicely. Okay, so you can imagine, let's start with there's a problem, right? So it comes up that we're approaching the end of our sprint goal. He's not getting their thing done. And they haven't really been letting anyone know that, so they're faltering on their commitment. They said at the beginning of the sprint, I think I can get this particular thing done. It turns out they're not getting it done. They haven't really been saying anything. And so finally, it starts to become obvious that there's been a violation of the openness value. They were not being open about their struggle with their commitment. So first it seemed like a commitment violation, but you have this language of talking about it. What's going on? What's this commitment? Openness violation. We're not finding out about this soon enough. We're not going to be able to respond to this change soon enough. So when you get down to the bottom of it, it turns out in this example that I'm just making up, has been interrupting this individual changes that they want done to the work product. And this product owner has been violating the focus value of the developer, who has committed to do something, but they've been unable to meet their commitment because they have been from their work owner. But they've also not had the courage about that. Maybe they were thinking that if they were to say something, bad things would happen, so they kept their mouth shut. Maybe it comes down to the fact that in general, this particular team has a problem with respect. The developer who was experiencing this violation of their focus value felt like they would not be treated with respect if they were to raise this issue. And so you can see how they all kind of tie together, and it gives you a language of understanding, of communicating where these things are falling apart, and it gives you an awareness of what's going on with each person and a way to share that, communicate that. And had an hour and 15 minutes today. I thought, all right, I'm not going to skip over these because I like these ones. And so the last one that I touched on is respect, and respect is my favorite one of all of the Scrum values. The respective context is accepting that whoever it is you're dealing with, that they're doing the best that they can. They might not be doing the best that you want them to be doing, the best that they can do. So let's be real about that, right? So that's really what you want in an Agile model. You want an awareness of reality so that you can do the right thing base. So when someone is doing the best that they can, you want to really understand what that is. So if somebody is late all the time, they're doing the best that they can. Let's not treat them disrespectfully and assume that they're just screwing off on purpose, right? And so when you start to think they're doing the best they can, you then also have to think, what can I do to help them do better? Do we need to give you a call? Do we need to buy you an alarm clock? What can we do? And it may end up being the case that they just can't do it, and that they're doing the best that they can, but respectfully, this team, you can have those conversations respectfully, but really, in terms of why this is Agile, is this is giving you an understanding and a language in your head of having an awareness of what's going on with another person. Because who isn't doing the best that they can? Very few of us. There's very few of us that are just intentionally doing poorly. Who would? It's just crazy. But when we, you know, it happens to all of us. You know, you get lazy. You just get into your more instinctual aspects, and we treat each other disrespectfully a lot. I think a lot of times we treat each other as if you're just late. You're late all the time. You're just a late person. This person is just late. It's not healthy for a team. And the reason why that's Agile is because it gives you an awareness into what's going on, and that's huge. So that's a big part of Scrum that I think is overlooked. Scrum has these iterations, right? These sprints. And I like to think, in the context of what we're talking about, as providing an optimized awareness into a larger effort. So what I mean by optimized awareness is if you look at a broken thing when you're trying to make a decision on whether you want to keep going or stop or turn back, you're not going to make the best decision, right? So it's this idea that we're going to get something to what's called a shippable increment. that means that it is the best version of itself for checking. It's for the time that you've wanted to spend on it. So you're thinking like, well, let's put 2 weeks into this and polish it up and get it to a reviewable state so you can see this thing working and you can decide if it works pretty good. If you have an awareness into that on day 2 or day 3 and you think like, oh, geez, this might never get where we want it to go, right? So the idea of Scrum in general is breaking larger things into smaller pieces, breaking organizations into smaller teams, breaking work into smaller chunks, time into shorter increments, right? So the iteration is a 2-week increment that we're going to work the best that we can and polish it up. And then we're going to, in between iterations, we're going to decide if we want to keep going, change direction. Maybe we put 2 weeks into something and we had a really nice polished up version of something that we don't think we should do anymore. You don't want to find that out after you've been working on it for 6 months, find that out after you've been doing it for a short amount of time. And so that's how iterations and allow for change. So this is I think that we can safely say Scrum is Agile way of managing work. Okay. The dilemma here in this talk, if this were just a Agile talk and a Scrum talk especially, I think we'd all get an A+ and we could stop there. But this is a talk about Agile design, and there's a little bit of a dilemma here. And to kick off this dilemma, I want to consider a phrase that's all too familiar, and I want to consider it in the light of iteration. And this phrase is, you never get a second chance impression. Like the Head and Shoulders ad that most of us remember from 2 decades ago. But this ad, I think this ad was really effective because we all instinctively, in some sense, like, oh my God, I'm preparing for a date, and if I have flakes, then that's going to be the end of it. They're never going to see me again. It doesn't matter if I catch them a second time on the street and say, hey, no flakes this time. It's too late. So if we think about this, coming out of what we were talking about with iteration, right? So that flaky-shouldered self of me on date number 1, hey, that's just beta, Kelly. Wait until the next release. It doesn't really work, right? And I think designers understand a statement like this instinctively because they have a lot of pressure on them to create with purpose, deliberately, and with intention. And the parts of design that will be hard to change later get the most attention, right? You need to get it right. So first impressions are arguably later because they don't happen again. You can't change it. The next time will be the second impression. So the first impression is going to always be what it was, and those need to get the most attention. So if we consider an iteration shipped in a state which design consider potentially a less than design state, it's not going to, it's harder for it to have the same intended on the viewer, right? So there's a lot of pressure to get that right. And I think you can understand the pressure and importance of this if you've ever had to prepare for something very important. So I think I did all right. I went with a button down today. Event is it's interesting because the event is coming no matter what, and you just slowly run out of time. And, you know, maybe none of the shirts in your wardrobe are the exact right shirts, but as you run out of time, you start thinking like, oh, which is the one I'm going to ship with today? So there's a lot of pressure, and it's important to, you know, to do your best to get it right. But there's also a lot of studies that, you know, will help us understand this. You've got a study, I've got a study here, and there's a lot of these where design appeal predicts rejection, which is mistrust. Personalization of content, for example, in this study, predicted selection of an advice site. So the more intention and deliberate aspects to a site, you know, the design, the way that it looked, the way that it worked, and then this other one, the content that's on the site, meaning more to the viewer, they would trust a site. So it's a lot of pressure. This is a big upfront pressure, right? So we're gonna redesign our site, and we want to increase enrollment by 50% or something, right? That's a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of stress. And planning reduces stress. So there's a tendency and desire when there's a lot of pressure to get something right to plan a lot, to a very big discovery or planning phase, or try to get it all right. And I think that we tend to think of the single finished product, right? So when we're thinking about what the final thing needs to be, it's natural to think that somebody planned it out all the way at the beginning. Okay, so it's very natural for us to think that we think about the big, grand, perfect end result, and we think we need to plan that, spec that all at the beginning. I think it's natural for us to think that way, and you can even see this when people try to switch to Agile. You end up with concepts like Sprint Zero. Let's do this iterative thing where we have a shippable increment at the end of each sprint, but let's do this big, huge planning sprint at the beginning. Like, we can't, it's hard for us to escape it. There's just tremendous pressure to do that planning and design all at the beginning. And we've tended to think this way for a while, because this is going to be on the test. Wherever complex design exists, there must have been a designer. Okay? So even if you think, like, you probably wrote a proposal recently where there was design, develop, launch. We're doing a big complex thing, and at the beginning there's going to be a designer. So this thinking is really part of a long philosophical history going all the way back to Aristotle. All the philosophers have kind of thought this way about creation and design and how things come together. And Thomas Aquinas, back in the 13th century, took the rest of that statement that I had up there to try and prove the existence of God by following that nature is complex, and therefore nature must have had an intelligent, and this is known as the argument from design. And this is just how we tend to feel comfortable thinking about these things. The argument from design became popular in relation to watches, complex things, right? So websites are complex, and before there were websites, there were other pieces of technology like watches. And the watchmaker analogy was popularized by William Paley in a book, Natural Theology. And the story that Paley tells is that suppose I were walking across a beach and I toe on a stone. I might ask how that stone came to be there, and I might say, oh, maybe it was there forever, whatever, who cares, it's just a stone, it's just a pebble. But suppose I found a watch upon the ground. Assume that this watch were designed by someone, right? So people would hear this argument and be like, yeah, watches. If you found a watch, it was obviously designed by someone. Or we were all designed by someone. That's how the argument goes, okay? But Paley wasn't the first nor the last, and before Paley, Descartes, and so actually that last slide, that was a watch from around Paley's day. And here's a watch from around Descartes and Isaac Newton's time. Isaac Newton believed that the physical laws he had uncovered revealed viewed the cosmos and is a great time machine operating according to fixed laws, a watch created and wound up by a great. Right. I had something else that I usually say here because to be in the Walters in Baltimore, which I was recently, but it's been hand carried and it's a tangent. Sorry. It's a guy I work with, Colin, is here, and his wife works at the Walters, and she it to Germany. Likes to get credit for updating Wikipedia. You could go and you could update it right now because Wikipedia says that it's at the Walters in Baltimore. I was going to skip that part, but I'm sorry I blew it. So even before watches, there's this long, very interesting history of timepieces, timekeeping machines. And through advancements in springs, levers, user testing, technology, the watch evolved. Each one getting better than the last. And so, and the philosophers of this kind of idea of design all the way at the beginning started to fall apart as people started to understand evolution. And Hume pointed out that the watchmaker analogy is not realistic. For example, things are made. They tend to be designed by a whole team of people. And they're complex. Let me actually read what he says. Usually designed by a whole team of people rather than just one person. And these are usually the result of many years of trial and error, with every machine being an improved version of the last. So this is Hume way before we all started trying to develop Agile and in sprints.
Way before Windows 8.
Before Windows 8. Thank you. And you know, and so the in terms of evolution and adaptation is Darwin. Darwin wrote that Darwin was around during Pele's day and was a huge fan of the watchmaker analogy. But he wrote, the old argument of design in nature as given by Pele, which formerly seemed to me so conclusive, fails. Natural selection has been discovered. So, is there some big designer in front of everything pulling all the strings? Or is design involved in an ongoing way, a part of an evolution? I'll throw this up there because this has become insanely popular as favorable, referenced from Darwin, highly favorable to the concept of agility. And the dilemma we've been digging into is really about where does design fit into our understanding of creation? This part from Darwin is that it's not the most intellectual of our species or the strongest that adapt the best to change, a changing environment. So that's our agility, adapting to change. So let's go back to the future with this. And let's see how we can, we've been talking about human action and human creation, and let's play with how they combine. So, designing with agility. So earlier, not too long ago, I was talking about the difference between doing something with agility, human individuals using our lowercase a agility that we talked about, between that and something being agile. So let's talk about doing something. Agility is bringing good thinking. We want to do just enough thinking to be able to get started. So as a person, how often do you get bogged down getting started? You deliberate too long, you think, you overthink. I'm overthinking it. I don't know how to get started. I don't know if I can get started because I don't know which way to go. Think about your discovery, that you need to deliberate, and then you need to decide, and then you need to act. And each one is critical. started, how do you stay on the right track? So you would look for feedback. You would look for some form of user testing, right? So even as the watches were developing. Oh, and I should have pointed out that early watch, the watch from Isaac Newton's day and Rene Descartes' day, were not worn to wear time, because at any given time it was about 4 hours off. People were more interested in the idea of where it was going, to be able to have time on your wrist. And I think we all know, because a lot of us have smart watches, so it does go somewhere. But you need to get that feedback. You need to try it. You need to look for that. How is it being used in the world? What don't people like about it? So I bet one thing about that watch that people didn't like was that it was 4 hours off. So, but they were wearing it. So let's keep going and let's make it more accurate. User testing is really cool if you want to experience someone acting quickly based on the results. It's very effective. The one that I like to think about is we've had a client for a long time where there were aspects of their website that we really didn't like, and we try over the years to point out to them that having a page of different fonts of different colors and lots of it is not the best experience for a user, or doing certain things in different ways about the site. And we were only able to get to be so convincing, so persuasive about that. And it wasn't until that we managed to persuade them to do some user testing where they got to see users using their site and reacting, saying like, I thought the homepage was good because we had just redesigned just the homepage, but the rest of the pages, especially all this text, I just didn't trust this site anymore. No, I wouldn't buy anything from this website. So for them to hear, when they hear other users responding that way, when they can see the sale getting lost, it only takes about 2 or 3 of those, and it's like, oh my God, we need to fix this tomorrow. We need to fix this today. Can we do it today? Can we just start fixing it right now? Right? Because once you know what reality is, why wouldn't you just change and do the right thing? So user testing is really big for that. And you don't have to do like a big user testing exercise. You can ask anybody. You can ask your neighbor, hey, try this out. You have to look for this feedback. You can ask, anybody, your coworker, your aunts and uncles, whoever it is. You can ask them to just use your thing, or watch them use it. You don't have to go very far. This is my my daughter. When we redid Last Call's website, and too much money, and so I decided to do some very affordable user testing, and she's 10, and I asked her to use our website. We hadn't launched it yet. It still had a lot of demo content on it, but I created some scenarios, and I asked her to try to do some things, and I filmed it. And so this has audio, but I'm not going to try to figure that out. So I'm just going to talk over it, and so you can still kind of see it anyway. But one of the things that I asked her to do was find out if Last Call does design work. If you do, contact them and send them a message. And so she was able to see that in the menu there was a What We Do menu link. And at the time of this user testing, the strategy was, we're going to show our site visitors what we do by showing them what we do through who we do it with. And that sounded like very cool and interesting. And so that's what we put together. So we put together this screen on the What We Do page of our clients, and we wrote, here's what we do seen through who we do it with. And so she saw that in the menu, and she's like, oh, does Last Call do design work? Here it is, a bunch of logos. All right. And so right away I realized we were basically asking our site visitors to hunt and peck through each one of our clients until they found one that seemed like maybe it had some evidence that we did design work. oh, last call does design. And watching her try to figure this out, even though it said what we do seen through who we do it with, watching her go back to the menu, like, okay, maybe there's something different on the page this time. Okay, do they do design work? What we do? Nope, just the logos again. All right. And at the end of it, she said, once you explained it to me, I guess I got it, but you're not going to have someone there on a website to people. And so this was free. It's free from a 10-year-old. And so you don't have to go very far to realize, holy crap. So if you go to the website, I think you can see, but basically what we did was we put our heads together the next day, mid-sprint. We wanted to launch this thing quick, but it was like, this was serious. Like, why wouldn't we just fix this right away? We want people to know what we do. So we came up with something that we could do very quickly, and we did it. And you can send me an email if you think it was pretty good. And we've got plans. We're going to make it better. But in terms of for launch, I think we solved the problem. Do and see what we do. It wasn't a hard fix, but you know, it was clear that this very poetic thing of thinking that, hey, we're going to show you what we do by showing you who we do it with, was not really reasonable to think that anybody should have to go through that. So in terms of designing with agility, it's looking for that feedback. It's being open to change. It's changing quickly. Basically an agile human being trying to design the right thing. So what about our design process and our methodologies, right? How do we get it right? We're faced with something that's bigger than just one of us can do, and we've got to say, hey, we're going to do this big thing. How much do we plan, right? So that's kind of what we were talking about. You know, planning, deliberating too long, you don't act quickly enough, you spend too much time planning, and then you might go in the wrong direction. So how do we plan? Or I think we can think about also architecting something or designing something. It's all kind of, they're all changeable a little bit, I think, on the way that we're thinking about this and talking about this, right? So a masterpiece mentality ensures perfect as the enemy of the good. If you lodge something a little less than perfect, then never launch something at all. It can be said that a diamond with a flaw. So how much do we plan? Do we plan a lot? Also, Agile, when sold as snake oil, often results in management thinking they've escaped the responsibility of deliberation, right? Change, let's not think we're Agile, right? Agile solves everything. I'm going to the golf course. You figure it out. So how do we plan? But not too much. And what can go wrong if we don't plan? Yes, you need to plan, especially if you're designing something. Design creates something. It is deliberate and intentional. It's not haphazard and reactionary. Without deliberation, you lose any hope of control over the selection or rejection, as we talked about several slides ago from that study, where design determined mistrust or rejection of something or selection and trust of another thing. You lose control of that if you aren't trying to have an effect on that. One could argue that design without intention is not design. So you have to think and you have to plan a little bit. That's what it is. We're designing something. We're trying to do something with something. So you have to plan a little bit. And so to make this agile, what we really need to do is reconcile our dilemma for an iterative, maximally effective experience event designed to have an effect, an affect in terms of emotion. And the viewer of the site may need to elicit trust. It may need to elicit outrage, if it's a political site or something, we need our visitors to be affected in the ways that we are intending them to. So we need to make for agile design. And so for something to be agile, it must bring awareness to its work, adaptation. So let's look at some process, right? So here's a project. There was very limited discovery. And actually, one thing that I'm going to point out at the end of all of this is that these next couple of slides about this NTC project, you could describe it in a very traditional process way, very traditional wording, but you can also talk about it in the context of everything we've been talking about. So I'm going to talk about it in that context, okay? So we did a very limited discovery, get some ideas. There's no bad ideas. We did a little divergent thinking. We threw some stuff out there. One of the decisions that we made in terms of a design decision was to do small pieces. And the high fidelity I would consider as optimizing for awareness, right? So this is that idea where if you do like a low fidelity sketch or something, it's not going to have the same feeling or elicit the same emotion. The person making the decision can't make as good of a decision as they could if it were more of a polished piece. But you don't want to spend too much time on it. Small, quick logos that look pretty good to talk about, to get feedback on, to converge toward a solution. And then we would respond based on that feedback. And so we had a meeting. The conversation was basically like, well, we know the conference is in DC, but we don't want it to be political. I canceled 3 of them out right away. And the other one was just thrown in, didn't really fit anyway. But this caused the conversation. So we don't want it to be too political, but we want to acknowledge, some of the places where it is, but we want it to be fun. The idea of a carnival got thrown out, just almost kind of like, hey, let's make it real fun. What do you think about that? But meeting in the middle of political to carnival landed them on state fair. Next iteration on the logo design, and that's the one that stuck. So we converged to a state fair. Logos are great if you have the option to start from logo because they can be small, high fidelity pieces, and settling on one gets you so much. Color scheme from this and a feel, we're able to extend that out, and it's a lot easier to get acceptance on something that is consistent with the thing before it. And we could evolve this further, letting this having the content be consistent with this look and feel, and build out the website and very easily just build out and evolve. There's not really anything new to this design process from a bird's eye view. I think the more traditional way to describe this is you get 2 rounds of revision, right? So we did a logo and then 2 rounds of revision, and then you get another logo or something, or a website, 2 rounds of revision. I would submit to you that being able to describe the work in a traditional method and also in an agile method gives credit to the idea that agile is very much a mindset. Work in an agile mindset and communicate in a more realistic way and still get the same results. Now let's consider and run through a design sprint. I didn't know this, but 2016 was the year of the design sprint. Search on the internet for Google Ventures and design sprints to learn all about those. This was a design sprint that we did with a client at John Hopkins, and it was a 7-day sprint. But let's consider how this went. We didn't do it exactly like Google Ventures does it, but that's okay. We planned just enough to get started, right? So this is a common theme. You want to get something reviewable so that you can stay on the right course, stay the correct course. We planned just enough to get started with a visit. So collaboration with the customer, face-to-face with the customer or the client is of paramount importance. So an extensive on-site meeting to learn what they do, what they want. So here's an example. This is art that was on their walls. What it does is they create virtual renderings, three-dimensional renderings of your heart. Not like a heart, but each one of you could have one of these hearts rendered. And then what happens is doctors and scientists or whoever can use these renderings to run virtual tests so they can discover things about your heart without having to take your heart out, which is preferable. And these renderings are produced, this must be like a heat map kind of thing, but it's very, the client has developed this very artistic eye and really seeing the beauty in their work. So they had already up these very colorful images of this work in a very artistic way. And we allowed that to influence us and carry that forward. And so our first, on day 2, we produced these, influenced by the heart rendering on the upper right over there with a lot of the color from the different images that we found on site and the different feeling that we got from them that we thought they might be interested in. And we produced these as quickly as possible in one day for review, for that feedback. And of course, they liked a little bit in each one of them. It's the best of all 3. So we took from that they liked the color scheme. We did some hand illustration to get this kind of blended into the color scheme to be adapted. In day 3, we expanded the aesthetic directions, refined the illustration, and kind of threw it all together with more versions. So this is just one more day, day 3. And things moved forward pretty quickly. And we started to think we had room for a little bit more. So we thought, let's quickly just throw together some logos and see, you know, put this process to the test of like, well, and see what works, and then refine it and work on it and pick whichever one seems like the right direction and keep working on it a little bit. So this was an unplanned round of logo designs that we threw in on day 5. We kept working on the other site, so eventually this was going to be like a website that they were going to develop. We were just doing the design deliverable. They, I think, chose the one on the bottom left. Code, those are brackets for kind of the code and technology that's happening around the heart, and the heart is very digital, almost pixelated, or like pixels, and there's kind of like a health cross going on, so it was very conceptual, and it was choose the one you want them to choose. But we were able to tune that up since we knew that was the right direction. So on day 6, we refined the logo and continued refining the website design deliverable. And it just came together, and this is day 7. The website designs on day 7 were handed off to their developer, including exporting image assets, etc. So you can get things done very quickly. Getting feedback, doing a little bit and getting feedback. And the trick to this, one of the big tricks to this in my professional experience, is you need that trust, right? So if you don't have that trust, you're going to end up with a process where, well, no, we want you to promise perfection and time frame. We don't trust you to just do a little bit and then get our feedback and then do a little bit more, because if you're just screwing off, doing a bad job on purpose, we may never get to what we want, and we'll have paid you all this money. So that's kind of where things fall apart is if you don't have that trust. So you need trust. You need that respect. You need to be treated as if you're doing the best you can, and you do a good job, and you do a little bit and get feedback, and you do a little bit better, and what comes out of it is pretty good. And what about that unplanned logo? One of the people on our design team pointed out very, very smartly yesterday. Do you think if you had started with the logo that you would have ended up with the same result? Probably Probably not. We probably would have had a very different result. There'd probably be like those code brackets all over the place, color scheme. Would it have been whatever it is that we ended up with by starting with the logo? Thinking like, no, we have to start with logos. What we ended up with? But what we got looks pretty darn good. And it took 7 days, and they got it developed shortly thereafter. So the logo wasn't planned, and that's misconceptions of Agile. Tell us not to have a plan, but to always be planning, right? Not planning has consequences. You can think about haste makes waste. You didn't think, you just acted and now things are wasted. We don't like waste. We have to sense and respond, inspect and adapt to remove the waste of going in the wrong direction. One of the core ideas of an Agile methodology. A little bit and you recalibrate. You stay in the right direction. Whether even if that direction is in the other way that you thought you were going to go at the outset, it doesn't matter if it's the right direction. Part of the thinking. So if we want to think a little bit more about Scrum, which some of us aren't sure if we're doing or not yet, we can consider Scrum's Agile planning. So Scrum has in it things like backlog grooming, where you're going over what the work is, what done would mean for each thing, and when you might put it into a sprint. You're basically, you're grooming regularly. As the work gets done, you go and look at the backlog of the things to do next, and you think about how you might do them. How is it changing? Is the relevancy changing? Does some of the stuff just need to get thrown out because something was so successful or unsuccessful in one of the sprints? There's planning at every stage periodically. There's sprint planning at the beginning of every sprint, right? Depending on how things are going, you want to adjust course. You want to be free to do that. You want to be trusted to do that. Because something might change. For several, I like to, when a lot of times clients want to know, like, will we be able to get this done in 7 sprints or something? And it's like, well, we can forecast out 7 sprints. And I like the word forecast because you might be able to look at the weather and be pretty sure that if it says it's going to rain tomorrow, it's going to rain tomorrow. But 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days out, who knows? It's anybody's guess. It always gives me a little bit of a chuckle when the Weather Channel wants to give me and the 10-day. It's like, all right, so let's look 10 days out, see what it looks like. Sprint releases, which, you know, the sprints have iterations. Those are basically the cycle time between that's the time between when you check in to see if you're going in the right direction or not. Do you need to do different design? Do you need to change anything about your original design? So you don't have to be doing Scrum or sprints to have a cycle time. You could be doing just working and just checking in every few days. That's your cycle time. That's the checking in. And also the retrospective is a big part of Scrum and should be just a big part of any way of working together. Retrospectives are at the heart of Agile. The retrospective is asking change. And what should stay the same? What should we stop doing? And what should we keep doing? And think about this when you do a little bit of design, a little bit of work and get it to a reviewable state. You're kind of doing little mini retrospectives. What's working with this design? And what should definitely not stay the same? What should we cut from what we're doing? We want that feedback. We want that retrospective. And I think what makes a retrospective work good is this idea that's being talked about as red is good, and bringing that to the design process. So what red is good means, if you have like an error light, like if your project is status red, I think in a lot of cultures, a lot of corporate cultures, you want to make that green. okay? So we want this project to be green, it's good. But the idea that red is good is now we know there's a problem and we can fix it. And that's good. It's good to know when there's something wrong with something as soon as possible so that you can go to that and help. Because red could mean bad. Red also could mean help, right? Let's help something. And design needs and craves this feedback. So I'd got some feedback one time at a retrospective that when I was in a product owner role, design was showing some work and I was saying, good enough, let's just ship it. We'll just ship it. And my fear was that I was going to point out something that was a little that I didn't like about it, and it was going to be let's go back to the drawing board time. And I didn't want to share that feedback. But design needs that feedback, and you need to trust design to not go back to the drawing board. And you can give your feedback differently. You can say send everything back to the drawing board, but that padding, that margin's a little bit off, and give them the ability to say, all right, we're not going back to the drawing board, but we can fix this quick and get a better product that way. So it's important to have the courage to be open about how you feel about something, to bring that awareness to stay on the right track. And so 2 more slides on playing with the idea of making for agile design. You never get a second chance to make a first impression, where a first impression is always the first impression. It's hard to change later. If we can do everything that we can to make something easier to change later, we can get started sooner, easier to change later, so we can be more agile if we're that much. So if we think about agile architecture or architecture in general, so one of the thinkings on this is if we think back to database architecture used to be really hard to change. And so you have to spend a lot of time getting the data model correct before you can get started. And time figuring out, and we know that's started soon. That's not planning and design. What's happening, this is where pattern thinking is. So there's a keynote tomorrow. There are lots of pattern labs things going on right now. And this is really where this is pushing the agile in our design by making things easier to change later and making it so that we don't have to plan as much to get started. Just the whole concept of thinking in patterns, of thinking in standards, of thinking in tried and true ways to do things. Last call is developing this further, specifically for Drupal, with the idea of making things easier to change later, sooner, and better adjust course as needed. Making things easier to change later is a big way to increase the agility of your process. So having the team waiting while a few people plan and design everything out is wasteful. So as I'm thinking about this stuff and always kind of trying to make my projects more agile, the first time that I tried to make a development project more, or a redesign project more agile, we started with the minimal amount of design required and initial backlog refinement to get started. So I tried to get development on this like as soon as possible, basically before design was finished. And the first time that we did this, it was really tricky. It turned out that people are really people are they feel there's a feeling, a lot of safety in feeling like everything before my step was done and it's all been handed off to me, and now I get someone else, and this is what gets criticized of doing our fault, throwing it over the wall and doing the next piece and throwing it over the wall. But it turns out that people are really comfortable with that because they can have their whole thing and they can work on it and they can take full responsibility for it, and then they can hand it off. And if something goes wrong, it's not their fault. So there's a safety in that. And so it's very uncomfortable for people to know them before they start on it. And I witnessed this in trying to get items into a sprint where design wasn't done, because the question on the top of most developers' minds was, well, what's it going to look like? Right? So I wanted a content type that I could fill out but it's really hard for anybody to get started because they wanted to know. So it's very challenging. It's definitely very challenging. And it's challenging a lot of times for good reasons, right? Like people, like you need to, so getting this to work took getting a lot of feedback from the team and learning a lot about why people might feel uncomfortable without knowing the bigger picture. Reasons, like maybe much more elegant if you know a little bit more of the bigger picture, or maybe it's good for you to know that, well, we just want to try something and it's okay that it's more important that we try it now. And so it's really important for your team to have those conversations and make sure that everybody does understand, everyone's on the same page with starting before designs are fully, before the whole thing is planned out. And really on this, with alignment, you want alignment on your team that the reality is that we should expect to have to figure things out as we go. That's just reality. You can't figure everything out. Even if you think you figured everything out, you're gonna find out that you didn't. What happens? It'd be a really boring project if you thought you figured everything out at the beginning, but you were right. Like what kind of, that's not the kind of work that we do. And we should do that figuring out together, guessing right or making mistakes, listening and correcting course. It's in how we work that lets us do more together, better, and faster. We don't want to wait for the perfect watch to be designed before we make it. We ever would have gotten our Apple watches if we waited until they were designed before we made them. Designing with agility is designing just barely enough to get to the making, and then designing more. It is emergent and intentional. It hypothesizes, experiments, senses, inspects, adapts, and responds in an evolving relationship with the affected, with those affected by the design. We don't always have the answers given to us at the start, and that's okay. Thank you. I can take some questions. Yeah, let's go.
Do you have a handheld?
Oh, there's 2 mics up there.
You answered all the questions.
Was that thorough? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yep, thank you.
We're going to do some raffle prizes.
Oh, cool.
You want to introduce? Or you want me to?
Do you need a screen or should I?
No, we don't need the screen. We're good. So we have a few generous sponsors that have given us things to raffle off. Oh, of course, we don't have the box with the names in it. Can't hold that. She's going to tell you what they are. Well, I get the box with all the names in it. Anyway.
I feel like we're in a game show. Well, we have an annual subscription to Mapped Basic, which is it's a new training program that Pack Publishing has created. We have a few books. We have from O'Reilly Media. We have Designing Products People Love. We have another book from O'Reilly Media. It's Designing with Data. And the other book from O'Reilly Media is Tragic Design Book. And then we have Drupal a Wig by Chaz Chumley. And Drupalize Me, we have an annual membership, and another Drupalize Me that is a monthly membership. I'm going to call out some names. Oh, and we also, this is free training.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's a free day of training with Evolving Web. Suzanne's up the top there. They have training in Boston in October, so this is for, we have a couple of those to give out. Oh, good. To raffle off. Okay. All right, so